I'm going to be talking about algorithms again, but in a very different way to Anna. And this presentation also is kind of following on from something I presented last year. And this is much more focused on the kind of impacts of what I've been doing over this last year with this experimental now technology, and kind of touching on at least some of the things, the opportunities and challenges in relation to the future. So, for those of you that A, can't remember, or B, weren't here last year, the area of research really is an exploration into creative coding as a means of producing variable digital prints. Okay? So this led to the creation of HP Spark, which is a piece of software developed from my experimental work in this area by HP Indigo, the digital press manufacturer, and part of their creative workflow systems now. And in July last year, so just after by the book, I think it was, I had the kind of a launch of these first experimental materials that I produced to demonstrate some of what this technology can do. And this is an image from the exhibition. So all these pieces are generated by one piece of code, and we printed 1,000. They're all completely different, and you've got people there standing in front of the wall all night, agonising which ones to take home. It didn't help when I said you could take more than one either. So the way I'm breaking this presentation down is in 3 parts. We're going to look at the research activities and their impacts, so what I've been doing. We're going to touch on how this fits into the wider context of creative technologies, AI being one that's kind of in the back of our minds and kind of we're all agonising about, or some of us are agonising about currently, and also the future in terms of what the future potentially is technology. And this is something that's actually developing almost at an hourly rate. I'm getting lots of kind of calls for meetings about potential usages in different ways. What you will notice is that at least initially in this presentation, it will feel tangentially related to book publishing. It becomes slightly clearer in the future section in terms of how publishers are beginning to consider it. So we'll look at research activities and their impacts. And I've broken this down really into workshops and also design materials. So as well as being a lecturer, I am a designer and split my time between both. And it's perhaps inevitable that as practice-based research, it is design and workshops. Okay. And these workshops have been split between agencies and also students. And this is with the employees of GF Smith, which is a kind of quality creative paper company in the UK, quite prestigious. They didn't quite shut the business down for the day, but they kind of deemed it quite important to get them all from all over the country to come and participate in this workshop. How the workshops happened is that the first part of the workshops would be each participant would be creating artwork in Adobe Illustrator individually. We then bring those together in a single PDF file, essentially creating a database of images. I then run it through usually one piece of code that I've already done to create these collaborative posters. And you can see the posters being printed there. We held this one at London-based Print. Actually what I've done, I ran it through 2 different pieces of code. So they've got 2 very different approaches to their same image file, so they could see the potential there. And then the second part of the workshops, these workshops are kind of ideally 4 hours plus, but I can do them in 2.5 hours, which is very, very brief. And the second part of it is getting the participants, in this case college students, to actually explore creative coding. So this software is based on the open source language P5.js, in turn based on processing, which are both open source coding languages. And these are really good. Most of these students haven't had any kind of background in coding at all. In fact, most participants that I've worked with haven't had any background in it. And, as you may all be thinking, there's a hesitancy at the beginning. People are terrified of coding. It's this whole mysterious world, yeah? But we overcome that, that's fine. And so it's worth just kind of mentioning in terms of the outputs of these workshops. I've delivered probably about 13 workshops. I may have underestimated that slightly, to probably 300 or so participants, and these have ranged from kind of 16 and 17-year-olds as part of the university's outreach and university taster days. Also across kind of undergraduate, postgraduate courses, across design, publishing and illustration, the areas I generally teach in. And this has also been conducted not just at University of Arts London, but beyond at other universities as well. I've also done these workshops to design agencies and other organisations associated with print, such as Jeff Smith. So it's worth kind of having a few more pictures to be able to play. Let me play. So this is a cover for the London College of Communication magazine. This was focused on the cost of living crisis. If that's flickering too much, I can stop it any second. This isn't the whole 1,000 covers, this is just maybe 60 of them. Should have put a warning on there initially. But that gives you a sense of kind of what's changing, what's staying the same. Okay. This is another project. This was doing some materials for DNAD, the Design and Art Direction organisation. People familiar with DNAD? They kind of mainly known for their awards in the design and advertising world, and they do various education as well. And these were some materials I was creating alongside a workshop they were doing. They were looking at deconstructing flags in a very analogue way, and they wanted me to apply that to this software. And I'm again working with the visual assets parts of flags. We can also see the block of stars from the USA flag there. On the left, allowing them to kind of scale differently, rotate any which way they want, so they become very deconstructed flags. On the right-hand side, we've got these kind of water can labels. They start to reconstruct parts of the flags back up, so they begin to resemble flags more. We could have controlled the colours, but I decided not to get away from nationalism and stuff. But the next example will take us to where we control the colours. So BAFTA awards, we're familiar with the BAFTAs, yeah, big kind of film acting awards. So they previously did work with the same printer I was using. The printer organised a meeting between us, and I did an initial workshop with one designer, just going through some of their images and applying it to different approaches, different pieces of code I'd already done, so they could go back and pitch it to whoever the board of BAFTA are, because this was a huge departure in terms of how the organisation were planning to market themselves and to kind of show themselves, but they were keen to engage with this technology. And one of the things that kind of came out of the initial discussion was the idea of demonstrating a diversity of their offering. So the fact that they don't just have film awards, but they have game awards, TV awards and TV craft awards as well, and that each one being different, celebrates different aspects of each part of the industry. You'll also notice here we've controlled and restricted the colours, and this appeals more to corporate organisations generally, because you've got that control over it. You can also see the sponsor's logo, EE. We're using the same green in some of the elements as well. So this was the BAFTA Awards night. So this is Aidan in Leicester. May not be particularly well known outside of the UK, I'm not sure. Holding up one of the brochure covers. Apparently, they announced at the beginning of the ceremony that everyone's cover was different and it was this brand new technology, and there was an audible ooh from all the film stars and other people that were there, which to me is great. I wasn't invited, unfortunately, but clearly wasn't interested. But they said it was kind of met with great reception, which is fantastic. Those of us that aren't familiar with Adrian Lester, we've got Colin Farrell as well. Again, kind of holding their brochures. So in terms of design materials so far, I've done work with D&AD. We've done those 4 different award ceremonies and brochure covers, all completely unique. And the only real change, they split the imagery in the same way, but they use different imagery and different colour palettes. And then I did the Artifact magazine cover, which I showed you. One interesting thing that came out of this as well was that because of the success of how the brochures were received in the film awards, their subsequent awards, they built the covers into their social media campaigns. So they had these covers, they're static here, but they're actually animated GIFs as part of their post to kind of demonstrate that, which was really interesting, the idea of digital going into print, going back into digital, and being much more closely tied together. And so we'll move to kind of the impacts, and I'm going to kind of alternate and then mix up workshops and design materials. Hopefully you'll follow me. So Vanessa Fletcher, Education Manager at J.S. Smith, that paper company. We see this kind of technology as being the future of the industry, which is quite a nice ringing endorsement. And from the workshops themselves, there was clear kind of increased engagement with print. I would show participants a whole range of materials I'd already produced with them. It would be quite difficult getting them back to their seats to actually get on with the next part. There were bits they could take away of them, and like I mentioned before, agonising over which ones they wanted, which ones they liked, and comparing them all. And it wasn't in silence. Often these kind of things were in silence, but there was a huge discussion about it, why they liked it, or I like these shapes, or I like these colour combinations, or whatever it might be, which is fascinating that it kind of has that conversation around it. It also helps participants overcome fear in relation to software. This is in relation to kind of even the Adobe Illustrator, people didn't need to know about that, and also the coding, a sense of demystifying, and also encouraging continued learning beyond the session. Certain workshops where we had a bit more time, students would go beyond purely what I was teaching them, and I would point them to various learning resources online and ways of finding out different functions that they could add to their code, which is fantastic. And also this kind of general enthusiasm for working in innovative ways. In some of the workshops, I've had people stay behind and say they don't normally, don't normally attend class, but they heard about this and really wanted to do it. I think because of the kind of innovation and this kind of working in different ways. Also weirdly had another 2 students ask me for my autograph, which is, I guess, a good thing. Felt very odd, but hey. But also it's a way of participants to work individually, but towards a collaborative output, but without any pressure on actually having to feel creative. So the posters randomly put their artwork together. It kind of doesn't matter what their artwork looks like, at the end of a great outcome. So in terms of design materials, we'll focus on the bit in yellow. So this is from Abigail Bills, the designer at BAFTA. It also helped us increase pickup overall, which is one of our big aims with sustainability in mind and wanting to reduce waste. So because the BAFTA covers were more desirable, less were left behind. Okay, usually they're left with almost all of them. So they only really have a value for those couple of hours while the show is on. But the fact that everyone, or most people, took them with them is fantastic because it gives much greater value to whatever the printed material is. And again, I think from design materials we've got that increased engagement with print, we've got this sense of sustainability and reduced waste coming in. For a start, you can, with digital printing, you've got more control over how many copies you print. You can specify to the nearest 1 rather than nearest 1,000, for example, with an iPhone. And this increased desirability minimises copies being discarded. A sense of diversity as well, although there's obviously ethical implications around this. Artwork can be generated by a variety of people, regardless of skill sets, and work can be utilised without bias. And a sense of diversity of output from the organisations, as I mentioned with Factor. Also a close relationship between print and digital that might have previously been possible. I've also been invited to be part of the British Printing Industries Federation Education Steering Group. Sorry, it's a mouthful, I can't remember quite what it's called. I'm also assisting with London College of Communications Capital Investment Bid for an HP Indigo Press in the new building. Whether that will happen or not remains to be seen, but at least in the short term, I'm also assisting with formalising London College of Communications' relationship with the local printer FE Birmingham, where a lot of this stuff is printed, in order to give students access to this technology. So not only can they explore it in workshops, but they can go and print and see it being produced at the printer as well. I've also been introduced for inclusion in the latest edition of Editorial Design Digital Print by Cash Caldwell. And I know that kind of earlier editions of this are used by various courses across the UK, certainly in relation to publication design, magazines, books, etc. So that's nice to kind of be part of that now. So how this fits into the wider context of creative technologies? Firstly, we've got kind of open source communities. As I kind of briefly mentioned, HP Spark is built on open source language of P5.js. And this is something that you've got access to the coding. You can download a coding editor or do it in your browser, so people can do that and explore that in their own time. There are also websites such as Open Processing, where you can kind of share your own code or look at other people's, modify and troubleshoot, and they make it clear the creative commons around that, in what ways you're allowed to use it and chop and change from it. There are also lots of other additional teaching resources out there because of the open source nature of this. There's a kind of very strong community to that. So, I mean, lots of people, including HP Indigo themselves, are talking about AI in relation to this. At the moment, what this isn't is AI. Okay, this is purely working with algorithms, me creating algorithms, linking up to data, which might be in the form of images, color palettes, could be Excel spreadsheets or databases to create creative visual output. AI is a much more kind of complex combination of multi-layered algorithms, large data sets, in which kind of it feeds back into its own system, it loops and it learns from that, which this isn't doing. However, there is potential to bring artificial intelligence into it. I've begun looking at kind of ChatGPT as a way of generating and writing code in this open source language as it's kind of built to do that. Not specifically to do that, but it can do that in one of its functions. And this may be useful in terms of helping the uptake of other people to try this as a way of shortcutting some of the learning by having something that helps write code for you or providing shortcuts to it. It can also interestingly produce iterations from your prompts, which could be useful in the same way that we might sketch or consider different approaches to a particular task. However, it must be said, I'm struggling to get it to do anything I would want it to kind of actually put my name to at the moment. It's quite basic. That may just be my lack of familiarity with how to write prompts for this, but that's something certainly that's worth developing further and looking at in the future. I think we're okay. I think I've got 2 more. Oh, might not be okay. Okay, so challenging the time, finding the time to continue doing this, because I'm a designer and a lecturer, in order to develop new workshops, but also communicate to potential clients. Most of those designs I've shown you are essentially built on the same bits of code, because clients kind of trust that and want that. They find the more conceptual stuff harder to understand how their brand fits with that. There's also money pressures around this as well. However, I've spoken to the university and there may be some government funding available due to paper being a foundation industry in the UK. It's quite difficult for me to navigate all of this on my own in terms of potential, and I don't have control over how HP Indigo are licensing their software. I'm essentially the only designer in the world other than their design team working with this software at the moment, so there's inevitable bottlenecks and, well, single point of failure, let's say. We're nearly there. In discussion with Penguin Mountain House at the moment, and this is two of their imprints, but that seems to go beyond. So they're talking to their sustainability department about various aspects of this. So there's clear interest in that, and I'm excited to see where this might go. Continuing discussions with agencies and brands such as Jaguar Land Rover. I'm now going to be a keynote speaker at an event in relation to the print industry later in the year, and partnering with Jeff Smith to do workshops at universities, and also I've been asked to look at doing one for a hospital school. I need to explore AI in relation to creative coding further, but alongside the ethical implications. I need to look at kind of development of future workshops to help students kind of come on this journey with me, but also brands as well, because I think the workshop's a really useful starting point for anyone to get their head around what's going on with it. Let's show we can do a workshop over the last 2 days. And really, I need to kind of spend some time looking at the functionality of the software and the opportunities of where that might lead, simply because I need to kind of push it in order to communicate what that can do to other people. And like I mentioned, there's that kind of not limited imagination in a bad way, but just I can only see what's going to work based on what you're presenting clearly in front of me. I'm very sorry, I had to whiz through that, but thank you very much.